Welcome to the Lung Health Foundation's presentation of Vaping and Cannabis Myth Busting. Be in the know, be empowered. This presentation is for the youth of the Eastern Ontario School Boards. My name is Monica Sarkar, and I will be your presenter today. Before we get started, a question to really think about and ponder on is, what does climate change, vaping, and cannabis all have in common? Climate change is incredibly important to our generation and future generations and is a hot topic right now. But what we need to understand is there are connections between climate change, vaping, and cannabis. So, something to think about and something that we will be breaking down later on in this presentation. So, our agenda today, and we are a little bit jam packed, but it's going to be great. I'm going to do a quick introduction of who I am and why I'm here as your presenter today, norms and agreements of how this presentation will be proceeding, and how to really watch this in your classrooms or at home via virtual learning. Then, a quick give one, get one activity to really just outline what are we expecting to learn today, what are we hoping to get. Then, the vocab, really make sure that we're on the same page and we all understand what we're talking about. And then myths and facts. This is the activity where we're going to really break down, what are the truths and what are the myths behind vaping and cannabis. And then reasons not to start. So if you haven't started using these products, which we will talk about this later, majority of students in Ontario have not, but more reasons on not to start. And then reasons to quit. So reasons to make sure that you're not getting stuck using cannabis and vaping, and all the different reasons to really quit using. And then coping strategies. Coping strategies are important for all of us, not just if you're trying to quit using substances, but also to make sure that we don't turn to substances as a way to cope, but we have healthy coping strategies to turn to instead. And then some resources. Really great resources have been developed for youth and young people of Ontario and Canada, and really want to highlight those today. And then we will wrap up with Magic Bag. So, and the last thing to note is that um, one person from every single school board can win a prize at the end. So, my name is Monica, as I mentioned, and this all started over 16 years ago when I was 14, and I did it for the free pizza. I was in grade 9, finishing up my first year of high school, when I found out that there was a club in my school that ran every Wednesday, and they got to eat pizza. And so I signed up because I really wanted that slice, but then I found out that what we were doing was actually very impactful. It was a really great opportunity to be involved, not just get volunteer hours, but to participate in what is called youth advocacy and policy change, and really, as a young person, start to shape what our society could look like and really tackle the big issues that are affecting our health. So I got hooked onto advocacy and causing change instead of getting hooked on tobacco or nicotine or other harmful substances at that age. And so from there, I got to participate in all sorts of presentations and trainings, different events in high schools, and going to Ottawa 67's matches, running youth groups. Um, Participating in different rallies to really push for policy change. There's lots of costumes involved in my years working in health advocacy and youth empowerment. And it's been quite the journey, and it turned into a career. So, what started at 14 with a presentation similar to what you're listening to today, um, then turned into this journey that I've been on for the last 16 years. And I am incredibly honored to be here today to now present this presentation to the youth of Eastern Ontario. And hopefully, you take something away today. And to make sure that you do take something away today, and if you're watching this recording in your classrooms, now is a really great time to really think about norms and agreements. So these are guidelines and not rules, but they're about how do we make sure that we get the most out of our time together. Watching a recorded presentation can be tough, and also you've all been doing virtual learning for a really long time. So a few things to keep in mind as you're going through this presentation, and if you've paused to have a discussion, is A, make sure that you're sharing the air. Give everyone an opportunity to speak and to contribute. B, be present. So learning virtually, as mentioned, is hard, but let's do our best to not get distracted and to be involved and to really think about the the content that we're covering today and the questions that are being asked today. And then trust the process. Everything in this presentation has been built with intention. There are learning objectives. And so if there's something on the screen that looks funny and you don't know why it's there, trust that it will be broken down and explained. And then next, if you have an opportunity in your classroom or just at home, grab a piece of paper, a post-it, anything at hand, and a pen, pencil, crayon, whatever you have, and write down give at the top of the sheet and get at the bottom of the sheet. And then you're going to think about your give. What is something you're going to bring to your group today, or you're going to bring just in your mindset while listening to this presentation? What are you going to bring to the table? Is it to be present, to be actively listening, to only be participating in the presentation and not looking at your phone or getting distracted? And then, most importantly, is the get. What is something you're hoping to take away or learn during this time together, during this presentation? Is there something specific that you've been thinking about? Are you hoping to learn that specific thing today? So take some time here. You can pause the recording and really think about your gives and gets. So now that your gives and gets have been written down, let's take a look at the vocab. Let's make sure that we're all on the same page when we understand the topics of vaping and cannabis. What do these two things mean? What do they look like? What do they sound like? So first, vaping. Vaping is fairly recent, so there's just a couple of different terms for them. If there are more, that would be great, and if you can send those along, I'd love to learn them. But vaping, also known as electronic cigarettes, e-cigs, and then the fluid that can often contains nicotine inside the vapes that is then vaporized and you see those big billowing smoke clouds is also known as e-fluid or e-juice. So when it comes to what a vape looks like, this is the anatomy of a vape. So at the very tip of the vape is the mouthpiece, and that's used to inhale the vapor and where the vapor is released. Then comes the tank. So it's whether it's like a tank or a pod or a cartridge that holds that e-juice or that e-fluid. And you can refill the tank or replace the pod or cartridge. And then comes the atomizer. So this is what heats up the e-juice to create the vapor. And then the rest of the vape pen or e-cigarette is the battery, which are used to power the whole device. And now let's take a look at the different generations of vapes that have hit the market. So vapes started looking like cigarettes, and they were often disposable. So that was the first generation. Then second generation, they started to look a little bit more gadgety. Third generation, they got a little bit bigger. You had more of that tank system that came into play. Then you had the novelty type vapes that came out as well, so looking like cigars or pipes. And now we've had the pod or cartridge based vapes that have become most popular and most prevalent that you often see. So this is Juul or E-Pen discs, and these are pod or cartridge based vapes. Next is taking a look at cannabis. So, cannabis has been around much longer than vapes have. So, there's quite a few names for cannabis. So, you have weed, pot, grass. You often might hear someone say they're going to go get high or they're going to smoke up. When it comes to the most typical form of cannabis. Often people use it as a joint or a blunt, which is when they take the flower, break it down, and roll it up in a wrapper, so it almost looks like a cigarette. Also known as cannabis can also be known as Mary J, MJ, dope. There's also cannabis comes in edible format, and then when it comes to there's also synthetic cannabinoids, which are called Spice, K2, Cloud9, or Mojo. And there's a lot of chemicals that are sprayed onto dried plants to create these synthetic cannabinoids, which are more dangerous than cannabis. Now, when it comes to cannabis, it is important to note that it's a drug that can be produced from the plants. And the cannabis plant contains many chemicals, including two main active ingredients. THC is the psychoactive chemical which affects the brain and produces the high. And over the years, the levels of THC have continued to rise, and higher levels can lead to harmful effects. Lots of chemicals are also sprayed on cannabis these days to increase the level of THC in the plant as it's growing and as it's being harvested. The second active ingredient in cannabis is CBD, which is currently being studied to determine possible medical benefits. And because of these possible medical benefits, there's been an influx of CBD products hitting the market. So you may have seen all sorts of different things like CBD drinks, CBD lip balms, CBD bath bombs, CBD gummies, even dog treats with CBD, with the idea that CBD dog treats can help lower anxiety in dogs. Now, again, studies are being conducted to explore these possible medical benefits, and it's advised to always speak to your doctor or whoever is a medical professional in your life before exploring CBD. Now, what does cannabis look like? So, as discussed, cannabis can come in all sorts of different forms. So, as mentioned, there's the joint, which is the most common form that weed or cannabis is used as, which is taking the flower of the plant, crushing it up, and then rolling it up in a piece of paper or a blunt wrap. But also, cannabis can come in the form of oil, so drops and pills. It can also You can also get cannabis in the form of e-juice for vaping purposes. There's cannabis ointments, and then also the edibles. So that's where the image of the brownie comes into play. So you may have heard the term weed brownies. So those are brownies that have been baked with cannabis. And we are going to be touching on the effects of edibles as well later on. So now that we know the vocab, we know what vapes look like and cannabis looks like, and all the different ways that they can be referred to, let's go back to our question of what do they all have in common? Climate change, vaping, and cannabis. Now, the main point here that we want to make is that climate change, very hot topic right now, especially for this generation, especially for my generation. And climate change, initially for previous generations, was talked about by big industries and big companies, where the onus was put, or the guilt, or the right way to create change around climate change was put on individuals. And while we were told to recycle, etc., big companies, big industries were doing a lot of the pollution. And so they had really big money behind them. Um, to fuel all sorts of marketing efforts, telling us as individuals that, if you recycle, if you do this, if you do that, you'll protect the climate. But meanwhile, you had big companies that were causing more harm to our climate. And it was through sneaky marketing that we really didn't fully understand the harm that these big companies were doing. And now, vaping and cannabis have big industries, big marketing, and big money and sneaky marketing behind them as well. And these companies are trying to hide the fact of the true effects of what their products will cause and do to us, and just manipulating us into believing that these products are cool or hip and everyone's doing it. But just like the big companies that are responsible for climate change in our world, and how they hid the truth and tried to mask it for so many generations and so many years, we now need to make sure that we're paying attention, so that we can avoid the same level of damage and destruction that we are now seeing when it comes to climate change. And we can avoid that if we pay attention to the companies that are using the same types of tactics with vaping and cannabis. So let's go into the myths and the facts to really break this down and explain what I mean by the different myths that are being put out there by vaping and cannabis companies, so we can really make informed decisions and you can be empowered when deciding about your health and the products that you use and don't use. So if you are in a classroom setting, what you can do is when I put the statement on the screen, you can If you choose to, you can stand up if you think it's a myth, or you can raise your hand if you think it's a myth. If you think it's a fact, just remain seated or keep your hand down, and then I'll reveal it. So if you're in a classroom setting, that's how you can do it. Pause the recording, and see, what your class thinks, and then we'll reveal the facts. So statement one is vaping is just harmless water vapor. What do you think? Is this a myth or is it a fact? If you think it's a myth, feel free to raise your hand or stand up if you're in a classroom. If you're at home, just bear with me. So, it is a myth. Oftentimes, you hear people say that vaping is just harmless water vapor, it's just water. But current scientific studies have identified hundreds of chemicals in vapes. And some of these chemicals are toxic, may cause cancer, or harm your health. Chemicals and toxins found in vapes may include propylene glycol, formaldehyde, nitrosonar-nicotine, toluene, cadmium, nicotine, and other contaminants such as nickel, tin, and aluminum. Now, these are really big words, big names. Obviously, none of them are water. So, already, if these things are in the vapor, then you know it's not just harmless water vapor. But let's really break down these chemicals. Vape chemicals in familiar places to really explain what is propylene glycol. So propylene glycol is also found in antifreeze, which goes in your car. Then you have nicotine, which is found in cigarettes. Acetone is another chemical found in in vapor coming from vapes, and that's nail polish remover. Rubidium is found in fireworks. And then you have ethylene benzene, which is pesticides used when trying to kill insects and other pests from our crops. And the other thing, just to bring it back to the climate change that we were talking about earlier, is some vapes can leak heavy metals and residual nicotine into the environment, which is very dangerous for our environment, for our wildlife, for our flora. And the other very important thing to note is there are currently no safe ways to recycle e cigarettes and e liquid pods. So ask yourself, how many times have you seen a used vape pod on the ground? I often see quite a few when the snow melts in the spring. And it's just really sad to see because we know better when it comes to not littering. And here's another product that can now be littered. So, statement number two, again, if you think it's a myth, stand up or raise your hand if you're in a classroom. Because weed is natural, it's harmless. Is this a myth or is it a fact? This is a myth, especially for those under the age of 25, since your brain isn't finished developing until you are 25. So, a lot of things to note and remember is that there's no safe amount of cannabis. Using cannabis daily or nearly daily increases the possibility of physical harm and addiction. So, think of your lungs, inhaling that into your lungs and the damage that it can do. And compared to cannabis that your parents or your grandparents, or previous generations in general, may have used, compared to the cannabis of today, the cannabis of today is much more potent, up to 15 times stronger, which means more harm. And then THC, which causes the high, as we discussed earlier, that high feeling, the THC can negatively change how your brain develops and impacts your mental health, especially when you're under the age of 25. And then synthetic cannabis, so we discussed it earlier, K2 and spice, has even more severe health risks. And now, just as a quick side note or an anecdote, I have friends who started using cannabis when we were in high school and they were using it daily. And it got to the point where it affected their mental health and their anxiety to the point where I had one friend who had to drop out of university because the daily use of cannabis had just made their anxiety so much worse that they couldn't cope. And they still struggle with their anxiety and they blame their cannabis use from a young age for it. So, I have experienced it or seen it firsthand through friends who went through this experience. And that's something really to keep in mind when it comes to, you know, making that decision around whether or not you are going to take a puff from that joint that someone passes you, or if you do decide to go to that party where you know a lot of cannabis or weed is going to be used. So, statement number 3: vaping is safer than smoking cigarettes. Is this a myth or is it a fact? So, Health Canada says vapes are less harmful than tobacco cigarettes, but less harmful doesn't mean safe. Vapes are still harmful to your health. And as we mentioned, vapes contain nicotine, a chemical that alters your brain after first use, especially if you're under the age of 25 and your brain is still in the process of developing. And nicotine also affects memory and concentration, which are two very important things while you're still in school, you're still learning, you're studying for exams, you're trying to get those grades for your scholarships, to get into college, to get into university, what have you. Very important to note that nicotine can affect your memory and your concentration. Also, the vapor contains many chemicals with known toxicity, as we discussed earlier. And then vaping can make asthma and other existing lung conditions worse, and the vapor can cause irreversible lung damage. Irreversible means that it cannot be changed, it cannot be cured. Once the damage is done, nothing can be done to fix it. And then lung disease has also been linked back to vaping, and in some cases even death. I found this a very impactful visual for myself, just knowing that the amount of nicotine in 1 joule is the same as a pack of cigarettes. So when it comes to harm, that's another thing to think about when it comes to vaping, is that 1 vape is the equivalent of smoking a whole pack of cigarettes. So if you wouldn't smoke a whole pack of cigarettes, think about that vape, and just think about it differently in terms of the level of nicotine that can be found in just that 1 joule pod. And then the other thing, speaking of Juul, is that 63% of Juul users didn't know that the product always contains nicotine. And so they started using vapes or like Juuls as their choice of vape without realizing that they were slowly becoming addicted to nicotine because they didn't realize that there was nicotine in the product. 63%. That is an overwhelming majority of people who unknowingly started becoming addicted to nicotine. And so that's where that harm comes in. And so Health Canada may say that vaping is less harmful than smoking, but there are many different aspects to vaping that are very harmful. So, moving on to statement number 4: weed is not addictive. Is this a myth or is it a fact? This is a myth. 1 in 6 people who start using cannabis as a teen will become addicted. So, if you start using cannabis at a young age and use it daily or almost daily, you're more likely to become addicted later. And then if you suddenly stop using, you may have withdrawal symptoms like irritability, anxiety, and disturbed sleep. So, my friend that I mentioned earlier, this is exactly what they went through. They started using weed when we were in high school. And they had to continue using it. They couldn't stop. And then they ended up having very terrible symptoms from a very young age. And their anxiety got to the point where they dropped out of university. That is not the case for everyone, but that was just my friend's situation, which taught me a very important lesson from a very young age. And now, a very important warning here is that edible cannabis products behave differently. So, edible cannabis products look fun. They look like candy. They look like cookies. These are all edible cannabis products. However, it's important to note that feeling the effects from edibles may take longer relative to the effects from inhaling cannabis. So, when it comes to smoking cannabis in a joint form or a blunt, which is the most common way that cannabis is used, when it is inhaled, the effects can be felt within seconds or within minutes, but when it comes to edibles, it can take a very long time. And because of that, people may eat more than one edible or multiple edibles because they do not feel the effects right away. And they also think it might be delicious. And so they don't necessarily see the harm in consuming more. And therefore, but the risk of overdosing then becomes much higher. And the symptoms of an overdose or greening out, which you may have heard of, include vomiting, psychosis, and severe panic. And the effects from ingesting cannabis edibles last longer than inhaling cannabis. So someone could remain high for hours and hours instead of just an hour or two. And so that's what makes edibles dangerous, because they look like candy, they taste like candy or cookies or brownies or chocolates, but they are quite harmful, and you need to know everything before ever consuming or partaking in using edibles. Going back to vaping, statement number 5 here is everyone is vaping. Is this a myth or is it a fact? This is a myth. 34% of students in grades 7 to 12 in Canada have ever tried a vaping product, which means approximately 66% never have. That is an overwhelming majority of youth and students in Canada who have never tried vaping. So even though it might look like around you or through the ads and social media that you're seeing that everyone is vaping, it's not true, especially for Canada. And so, what's important to note here is that the vape industry is trying to make vaping look cool. A study published 2 years ago showed that Juul's marketing campaign suggests that it targeted youth from the very beginning. And a team of researchers from Stanford University found that Juul's marketing campaign between 2015 and 2018 was definitely youth oriented, and that Juul also appeared to borrow directly from the tobacco industry playbook of flashy, bright, colorful packaging, or by promoting celebrity endorsements or profiling vape tricks on social media. This is the kind of stuff that the tobacco industry started doing decades and decades ago to get people hooked and addicted to nicotine and onto cigarettes. Um, and now we're seeing the same type of tactics being used by companies like Juul. And what's really important to note is that one of the world's largest tobacco companies, Philip Morris, owns 1/3 of Juul. And so you can really start to see the similarities between tobacco company advertisements and vaping advertisements, knowing that one of the tobacco companies owns 1/3 of Juul. But then there's also the admission of guilt from Juul when they agreed to pay $40 million after being sued for marketing to teens and young people. And this is really important to note that Juul always contains nicotine. And then researchers have found that from the very beginning of their marketing and when they were trying to sell their product, they immediately were just targeting young people. And now they've agreed to pay $40 million for doing so. And so this means that they've admitted guilt. They created a product that is highly addictive, that alters the brain when it comes to young people, especially. And they immediately started selling it to youth and young people, knowing that youth and young people are going to experience the addiction. They're going to experience changes in their health and well being. But by targeting young people and youth, that means that you get lifelong customers potentially because they get addicted from the very beginning. And so this is the same type of tactics that the tobacco industry used to use, and now Juul and other vaping companies are also using. And so it's important to know this so that you can keep this in mind and know that you don't want to get manipulated by companies like Juul and through their flashy and attractive marketing. And they've been doing this for a really long time, as the researchers pointed out. And the other thing is, take a look at this product image here. It looks like it's maybe just a whole stack of different candy products, but if you look closely, you see vapes, you see e-fluid, you see tobacco, you see cigarettes. And so this has been done intentionally. Why else would you create a product that looks exactly like ice cream packaging, other than to target youth and young people and even just attract kids? So, if you have younger siblings, think if they saw this pile of candy, would they accidentally pick up a vape pen or a box of cigarettes or e juice and think that it was candy and try to use it or consume it or eat it? And this is intentional marketing, it's intentionally sneaky by another company. So when we talk about what did all those things have in common, big money, big industry, and sneaky marketing are at the heart of it all. Now, when it comes to flavors, which is the number one way that vaping companies target youth, It's important to note that the chemicals that go into creating many of these flavors are among the most toxic in terms of damaging the body's white blood cells. So, the chemicals that are used to create cinnamon and vanilla are berries and cream, butter, and then spicy cooling. Those chemicals are some of the most toxic on the body in terms of damaging white blood cells. And that's truly terrifying to me because these flavors have been developed using these incredibly toxic and harmful chemicals, but the flavors have been developed to target youth. And so the same products that are incredibly toxic are being targeted and marketed towards youth. And that's one of the main reasons that for me personally, I would refrain from using vapes because that means I'm supporting a corporation that is out to target young people and harm the health of young people through their sneaky marketing. Another way to think about it is there are over 8,000 vape flavors used to sugarcoat nicotine addiction. And that's what vaping is. It's majority of the time it's nicotine, and using nicotine is incredibly addictive. And these vape flavors are there to sugarcoat it and get you to that nicotine addiction. And oftentimes we've actually seen, and there's studies that have been done, that people who start using vapes and who get addicted to the nicotine also start using cigarettes and other tobacco products. And so, because of this, Health Canada is proposing a full federal ban on vaping flavors, and this is solely protect the health and well-being of young people and prevent young people from being manipulated by vape companies through their flavors and getting addicted to nicotine and then having their health negatively affected by all those chemicals that we talked about. And really, like for me, what's important is that we're not supporting these industries that know what they're doing. They know how dangerous and addictive their products are, and they continue to profit off addiction. So, the tobacco and vaping industries have spent years profiting off addiction, and especially the addiction of youth and young people through their sneaky targeting and marketing, and it's their flavors, vape flavors like bubblegum, that target you and your friends. These flavors were also used in tobacco products when I was in middle school and high school, and they were definitely targeting my friends. And if you don't want to be manipulated, you don't want to fall for sneaky marketing, and you don't want to support these companies that are responsible for this level of harm, same types of companies that have been responsible for the type of harm that's been done to our climate and to our environment, then it's really important to not use vapes, and to not to start. So our final statement to determine whether or not it's a myth or a fact is that legalization of cannabis in Canada means that everyone can use weed. Is this a myth or is it a fact? If you are watching this in your classroom together, remember you can stand up or raise your hand if you think it's a myth, and remain seated and keep your hand down if you think it's a fact. So, this is a myth. Legalization means that you will have to be 19 or older to buy, use, or have recreational cannabis in Ontario, and the same age limit applies to vaping and tobacco. And what's really important to note is that cannabis use is not allowed at school, at work, or in an enclosed public space. And delaying using it as a teen lowers your risk of problems that we've talked about, like mental health, brain development, and lung health. And that's why our laws say that you can only use it if you're 19 or older to protect you. And very important to note is that you can only buy legal cannabis from licensed retailers. And the reason for that is that cannabis should be produced by licensed producers and purchased only from licensed vendors, because evidence suggests that illegal cannabis that's bought from local growers, etc., can be contaminated with pesticides and harmful chemicals. You don't know what is in it, how it's being grown, what are the conditions. And so, if you are 19 or older, only purchase from a licensed retailer, because you'll know that it is not been exposed to other harmful things that don't need to be there. So let's move to reasons not to start. And we've touched on a few reasons not to start already throughout this presentation in terms of the health effects, the addiction, as well as, saying no to being a target of the sneaky marketing by these companies. And so, on top of that, there are other reasons not to start. It makes it harder to learn and remember things. And so, nicotine and cannabis both affect your memory and concentration. It affects your mental health. It can heighten your anxiety, depression, paranoia, and this goes for both vaping and cannabis. It makes it difficult to make good decisions. This is especially true for cannabis use due to the THC, which is a psychoactive ingredient and it alters your brain. And it's incredibly difficult to make those good decisions when your brain has been altered while you're high. It affects the body. So we have lung damage, coughing, wheezing. It impacts your sleep. And as mentioned, memory and concentration as well. It lowers our ability to pay attention, which is really tough when you're in school and you're trying to complete all your different assignments and study for exams. And addiction. 9 times out of 10, e-fluid contains nicotine. And so, majority of the time when a vape is being used or a vape is being shared or a vape is being passed around, that vape has nicotine, and as mentioned, 63% of Juul users did not know that the product contained nicotine. And getting addicted to nicotine from a very young age is incredibly harmful. But nicotine is harmful at any age, and it's incredibly difficult to quit. And may have been exposed to that. You may have seen that with people in your life. So that's a really big reason not to start using vapes. Now, when it comes to reasons to quit, we're going to let Ethan tell his story.
My name's Ethan. I'm 20 years old, and I quit vaping 2 years ago to create more balance in my life. I was at a point where my vaping addiction was causing me mood swings left and right, and at the time, I had no idea why. I decided to stop vaping so I could figure out what was going on and why I was having all these mood swings. And little did I know that vaping was the cause. My advice to anyone that's trying to quit vaping is tell everyone. The hardest thing to do is to say no to people who don't know you quit. When I told everyone that I quit vaping, I felt twice more obligated to say no. And good luck on your journey.
And so, if you are thinking about quitting, um, one way to do so is to really use coping strategies to help you through your quitting journey. These coping strategies can also be used for you if you are, if you haven't started using cannabis or vapes, but you want to make sure that you don't start turning to substances to manage different anxiety and stress and other factors in your life. So, having coping strategies is a type of self care, and self care means asking yourself what you need and following through on the honest answer. So, these coping strategies can be used if you're trying to quit or if you're looking for avenues to make sure you don't start using cannabis or vapes, and then you have a way to manage your well being and really just taking care of yourself. And so the first one is breathing exercises. So, when we are stressed, our breathing patterns become fast and chest focused. But when we are calm, our breathing patterns are slow, even, and stomach focused. So, taking slow, calm breaths is one way for your body to communicate to your brain that you are safe and it's okay to calm down. So, to do this, breathe naturally, evenly, and at a speed that feels comfortable. So, you don't have to take really big, deep breaths, just at a nice, even speed. Now, focusing on sending your breath right down to your belly button so your breath rises and falls with each breath. You can put your hand on your stomach so you can feel the rise and fall, and just visualize in your mind that you're taking that inhale and you're focusing on your belly button as you exhale as well. One really great way to focus on breathing and doing a breathing exercise is box breathing. So think of a box and you're going to breathe in for 4 counts. So in your mind's eye, look at the box and do all four corners of the box. You're going to hold that breath for 4 seconds, and then you're going to breathe out for 4 seconds, and you're going to continue breathing out. Hold that out breath for 4 seconds and do this a few times. I find box breathing incredibly helpful. I do this to help me fall asleep, um, or when I'm just having a day and I need to take a break, I'll either sit at my desk or I'll lay down even on the floor and do box breathing for a few minutes. And it's incredibly helpful. Next is exercise or just movement in general. If you're someone who struggles with stress or anxiety, exercise can mimic that fight or flight response, which can send your brain a message to calm down. This is because your brain thinks you have fought or run away from a possible danger. So, and studies have shown that exercise is actually an effective treatment for feelings of anxiety and depression. Personally, I can share my own anecdote that if I do not do any exercise or movement for a few days, I do start to feel my anxiety creep up. And as soon as I do some sort of exercise, go on a walk with my dog, do some yoga, or do some biking, I immediately feel so much better. And as long as I'm doing some form of movement or exercise every day, I find that my anxiety and my stress levels are much more manageable. So, exercise has social, emotional, and health benefits, including reduced risk of disease, increased concentration, increased confidence, and reduced aggression. And lack of exercise, as mentioned, is also associated with increased feelings of depression or anxiety. So remember to do some movement, especially if you're feeling stressed out. This is a really great way to avoid turning to your vape or turning to cannabis. Is try exercise, try any form of movement. Getting on the ground and doing some downward dogs like this downward doggo, that could definitely help. Next is mindfulness as a coping strategy. So, touch is a really great way to be present. You could stomp your feet, pat your cat, or, if you can have access to a massage therapist, go get a massage. Get absorbed in the moment. So, playing sport, playing video game, or having fun with friends is another great way to have a mental break from worries. Bringing in that distraction and really just focusing in on it, of just being in the moment of playing that sport or that video game or just hanging with your friends. Focusing on really listening to an awesome song is another form of mindfulness. Eating something yummy really slowly, so savoring the taste and not just devouring it or wolfing it, but really taking your time. Another way of mindfulness is splashing cool water on your face. This can trigger the mammalian dive reflex, which is an automatic response that slows your heart rate and your brain waves, which designed to help us survive when swimming underwater. So that's another way to really calm yourself down and practice mindfulness. So focus on three things you can hear, three things you can smell, three things your body can physically feel. That's another tactic here. So just if you're stressed out, um, stop everything and think about the threes. Three things that you can hear in your environment. See if you can identify each one. Then three things you can smell. Are there three things in your environment that you can smell, or there something that you can even bring to your nose to smell and take a deep breath and inhale that scent? Essential oils are really great for this. And then three things your body can physically feel. Are you sitting on a chair? Is your hand touching the desk? Is there a water bottle near you that's a different texture? And just the three, think of just three things for the three senses. So that's important because mindfulness is about grounding and reconnecting with your body. So your mind can also be in the present moment. And that's why you think about that sensory piece of those three things for hearing, smelling, and feeling. So feeling grounded is one of the coping strategies. Getting creative. Our brain loves to be creative. Activities that allow you to express yourself aren't just fun, they can actually be quite healing as well, which is why things like art therapy exist. So we're thinking creative writing, dancing, music, and art can help and actually alter your brain waves and create different mental and emotional states. The second way these creative activities help is by acting as distractions. So they keep your mind occupied so you're not focused and thinking about your worries and your stress and in your anxiety, but you're focused on your writing, you're focused on dancing it out, you're focused on the music. And the third way they help is allowing you time to process and gain insights into your thoughts, feelings, or behaviors. Creative writing is really great about this because you can just write it out. Or if you are dancing or listening to music or making art, your brain is slowing down and it absorbed in the moment, but at the same time, your thoughts can really start to decompress and think about, what are your next steps? How are you feeling truly? So, TikTok, you're all probably on TikTok. There's loads of dances on TikTok. I know that's the new craze. So that's a nice, free, easy way to get access to creativity if you're not into the writing or into art. Maybe give a shot at figuring out one of those fun TikTok dances and just stay creative. And finally, one of the last coping strategies to really ruminate on is using your imagination and daydreaming. So, who knew? But worrying is one way your brain uses its imagination, but daydreaming is the flip side of worrying. So, in fact, when you imagine something, the same parts of your brain light up as if you actually experienced it. So, daydreaming is good for you. So imagine positive future events and how you're going to feel in those moments of something that you're looking forward to. Mental rehearsal is another way you can daydream. It can actually help you perform the task better. So, for example, athletes will often do mental rehearsal of different moves and different plays and how they're going to go about that. And then, so in the moment, they actually perform better because they did the mental rehearsal. Using your imagination to imagine a fear can actually reduce your anxiety around that fear. And then daydreaming about your friends and family can increase your feelings of happiness and connection with them. And so with the pandemic, yes, we've been distanced and you may not have had as much time with your family and friends, but daydreaming about them, thinking about them can actually increase your feelings of happiness and connection with them and also serve as that distraction from what's worrying you. So SpongeBob supports you to use your imagination. And sorry, the final coping strategy that we definitely want to touch on today is talk to someone you trust. Talking to someone you trust can help you think about things in different ways, and you can learn about patterns in your thoughts and behaviors by talking it out with someone else. Creating a safe space to support a calm learning environment can reduce your stress and your anxiety, and it can promote positive changes in your brain through exploring alternate perspectives and options that this person that you trust mentions to you just by talking it out with them. And then you can also be supported to try new strategies by actually talking it out with someone, sharing your worries, and not just living with it in your own head. But talking to someone, they can provide you with that support and they can provide you with new things, new ways to think about things. And so, there are resources available to you as well, so you don't have to do this on your own. If you are trying to quit, there is the Lung Health Foundation's Quash app. This app uses science and proven theories to help you reduce, quit, and stay smoke free or vape free. And you can track your successes and setbacks on your dashboard, and you'll see your longest quit streak and how much money you've saved. There are also calendar stats. So whether you're looking at your quit goal, healthy habits, successes, or setbacks, they can all be cataloged and show how far you've come and what you've achieved, which is really great when you're working towards a goal like quitting. There's also features built in to help you beat cravings, and you can use the app daily. So you log your cravings whenever they creep up. You can track how intense they feel, how you were feeling, and what circumstances you were in. And then you can select a healthier activity to cope with your cravings. So, like one of the coping strategies we talked about, but those suggestions are actually in the app. So you don't have to worry about remembering all of them. And then it'll help you recognize patterns that are in the way of you quashing your addiction. And the app also provides support. So the tips section is full of ideas and tools that can help you reduce, quit, and maintain your quit status. And you can take a look to find different activities, strategies, and helpfulness and more within the app. So if you're interested in quitting, definitely download the Quash app. It's available on both Android and iOS. And if you fill out the survey on your app dashboard, you'll be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card. And so users must be between the ages of 16 and 19. The in-app survey is due by November 30th, 2021. So you still have a month and a bit left to submit that survey. 5 winners will be selected, and the winners will be notified after November 30th of whether or not you won. You'll be notified via email, and the giveaway prize is a $100 e-gift card per person. And the deadline is November 30th, as mentioned. So within the app, there's a way to submit your feedback. If you are interested in quitting, download the app, fill in the survey before November 30th, and you could win a $100 Amazon gift card. Next resource that we want to share is the Kids Help Phone. Lots of really great resources within the Kids Help Phone. So there's different ways to learn about different topics. There's different ways to get in touch with someone. You can talk to other youth so you can get real-time support from other fellow teens or young people. You can get inspired. You can also get the support that you need right away by speaking with a counselor, for example. So you can call, you can text. There's other ways to get professional support. So if you are looking for someone to talk to, you can definitely turn to Kids Help Phone. It's a really great resource. Um, so you can text, you can visit the website, or you can call 1-800-668-6868. Next is jack.org, which is a Canadian organization that's been built. It's the only national network of young leaders transforming the way we think about mental health. So it's all across the country. There's really great articles available on their website if you want to learn about different topics. They do talk about vaping and other substance uses on jack.org if you want more information in addition to what we covered today. But what's really cool about Jack.org is that it's youth led, and there are chapters of groups of young people working year round to identify and dismantle barriers to positive mental health in your communities. It's coast to coast, so there's hundreds of Jack chapters in every province and territory across Canada, and that it's inclusive. So, youth mental health advocates are welcome to join existing chapters in their school or community, or you could even start your own, and you don't need to have any prior experience. So, there are thousands of youth leaders working from coast to coast, and their main objective is to make sure that every young person in Canada gets the mental health support that they need. So here's a screenshot of all the chapters in your area. So you can see that there's quite a few Jack chapters in the Eastern Ontario area. If there isn't one that's close enough to your school, then you can always start your own. And they also have a really great Instagram that explains everything as well. So then want to highlight some local resources. So you have for all of Ontario available to everyone is the School Mental Health Ontario. And this works with school boards to support student mental health. And their website hosts resources on vaping and cannabis for a number of audiences, including students. Next, for the Algonquin Lakeshore area, we have Kairos. I'm sorry if I'm not saying that correctly. This is a counseling service which specializes in helping youth who are experiencing any level of substance abuse personally or with a family member. Services are available as an outreach program in all elementary within KFLA and in the ALCDSB secondary schools and alternative education sites. And then also in the Algonquin Lakeshore area is the Youth Abs Substance Use Program, which is for youth and young adults between the ages of 16 and 24. There's an addictions counselor from AMHS HPE and a mental health addictions therapist from Youth Ab, which provides services for youth and young adults experiencing substance use issues. So there's some websites that you can go to, or you can call the central intake. So 613-310-6736, or just visit the website for more information. There's also the AMHS KFLA Youth Team, which provides a unique wide of services to provide community based care to youth experiencing serious mental health illness or addiction if you're between the ages of 16 and 24. And there's specialized staff on this team, which include youth case managers, youth addiction counselors, youth problems for gambling and gaming, as well as LGBT uh, SQ plus addictions counselor. There's walk in crisis services, which has resumed in Kingston as well as in Napanee. And they do have a crisis phone line that you can contact that's 24/7. To get more information, you can visit their website. Now, moving over to Eastern Ontario, so Cornwall, there is the Cornwall Community Hospital Child and Youth Mental Health Service. And you can visit their website for more information of the services that are available there. There's also Renfrew County, and in Renfrew County, there's the Phoenix Center, which provides programs to improve the mental health wellness of children, youth, and their families. And they have a website that you can contact for more information. So, phoenixctr.com. Also in Renfrew County, there's the Renfrew County Collaborative E-Walk in Counseling, which provides access to mental health and addiction therapy services for children, teens, their families, and youth. And they have a phone number that you can contact between on Thursdays from 11:30 a.m. and 6 p.m. And then there's also Counseling Connect, which offers free phone or video counseling sessions to residents of Ottawa and the surrounding area. Okay, that was a lot of information, but you will have access to this presentation as well as this recording. And if you need any assistance, please reach out to your guidance counselors, to your teachers, and all of those websites or Kids Health Phone as mentioned. Now, to wrap up this presentation, is to return to your gives and gets that you wrote down. So I want you to think about what you wrote down as your gets today. Did you get what you were hoping to learn today? Are you taking anything else away that's new that you learned? I know we presented a lot. Lots of information was covered. I hope you did take away what you were hoping to get or you learned something else in its place. But I want to say thank you for your time today. Thank you for spending this time to talk about vaping and cannabis. I hope you were able to pause the recording and have a discussion if you're learning, if you're watching this together in your classroom. And I hope you can use this presentation as a resource. If you do have any questions, please feel free to contact the Lung Health Foundation, and we'll be more than happy to provide answers to any questions or to do the research to make sure that you get access to the answers and to further information. I hope you have a wonderful day and thanks for spending this time with me.